Now that we discussed the articulation between the parts of the presentation, let's discuss the structure of the slides themselves. The basic idea is that you should see your slides as a way to summarize as much information as possible while keeping the right balance of how clear they are. The first thing I need to say about slides is that there are several approaches one could take. One of the most popular approaches when making a presentation is to see your slides as a support to your oral presentation. In that case, a slide should have as few text as possible. It will just be an image, or at least something very visual. Here, we'll take exactly the opposite approach. We'll see a presentation as a written document that is not necessarily a support to an oral presentation, but is instead self-contained and presents first and foremost information that stands alone. It might also be used for an oral presentation afterwards if needed, but most of the time, as a matter of fact, it's not. This is a typical consultant approach, where your documents will be passed around teams of different persons, and you will not necessarily have the opportunity to defend it. And sometimes it may happen that you will have this opportunity to explain what you've produced in a face-to-face meeting. So it's really a matter of finding the right balance between several objectives. And to attain those different objectives all at once, you should structure a slide as something that can be read at different levels. People will sometimes only read the title, and that's why your title needs to be informative. Instead of entitling your slide Conclusions Summary, for instance, replace it by the actual conclusions of that slide. An example could be, should we adapt our go-to-market to focus on our core business? This title, in this case, is an informative call to action. It's longer, but it's useful. It's what we call an action title. What's also nice is that if you do that, and then read all the titles from the first slide to the end, you should have the outline of your story. It's a neat way to check that everything holds together. Then, within the body of the slide, it's good to have an illustrative way to summarize the message you want to convey. We'll discuss this point specifically in the next video, but it may be a table, a graph, a chart, or an illustration, for instance. Always add to this illustration some textual explanations. Your slide should be self-contained, and you should make sure that all the information the reader needs is on the slide. Finally, you may decide to have some takeaway boxes at the end of some key slides. It's a kind of milestone within your presentation. For instance, a text box emphasizing a key message that your audience should absolutely remember. At the end of the day, what's difficult is to find the right balance between self-containedness and conciseness. In order to be clear, a good story is needed to brief, not too long. So are your slides. And the content of your slides should be the pieces that structure your story. I already mentioned that a neat way to make sure your story flows is to check that all the titles are following each other well. But you could see it the other way around. The action title of a specific slide should summarize this slide perfectly. If you cannot summarize this slide in one sentence, it's probably that you should split the slide in parts. One slide, one idea.